Brilliant. Okay, so yeah, so this is just telling you, obviously, next screen then please, this is who I am and what we're going to be talking about. You've touched on quite a few things, Matthew, earlier, and I am concerned, obviously, as an insurance person, that people are going to not want to consider insurance. And really what I've going to talk about is the extra covers that I think you may or may not necessarily have thought about. Yes, obviously I can talk about that you do need to consider fire. I paid a large claim only 18 months ago to a customer who had a fire, 1.5 million. And so it does happen. Fire is obviously very important. But what I thought I'd talk about is something that you perhaps may not have thought about. So I really want people to look ahead and consider the covers that may or may not have been considered. So I'm going to touch on directors and officers cover. I'm now very cautious about talking about cyber. Hearing about David Pearce is on the call because he will be much more experienced than I am, but it's really just highlighting why cyber cover is really important as well going forward. Health and safety. I talk a lot to my customers about health and safety and how it mirrors and goes hand in hand with insurance cover and how it protects a client. And then on the very end, I'm going to talk about pandemic pool re, which is just touching on what is being considered. It's still in very much the early stages, but I just thought I touched on what they're talking about going forward. So yeah, Vicky, thank you. So as we obviously are looking to come out of this from the point of view of getting businesses up and running, it's very much about the protection, and that's the angle that I'd be coming from. So I want people to consider that they are looking at all the angles and protecting both the businesses and themselves. Yes, please, Becky. So I mentioned the first thing I was going to look at is directors and officers. I'm not sure whether everyone on the call has actually heard of this cover, but basically it's essential cover for the owners or the managers of a business, and it covers you. It's a defence type of insurance, and it helps prevent allegations being brought against you, which you then have to defend yourself against. And potentially you could have done nothing wrong. It's just someone makes an allegation against you. So yeah, next slide, please. So under the directors and officers, there is actually 3 sections of cover. There is the corporate liability, and I liken that to, and your standard business policy would be the equivalent of your public liability. So that's a third party making a claim against you. If you're a limited company, is set up from your accountants to set you apart from your liabilities under that business, but equally that then creates you as a separate entity, and therefore someone can make a claim against you personally. Entity liability is if you've got staff and potentially you get a member of staff who wants to make a claim against you, and that would help you in defending yourself against that. And then crime, this is not available if you're a sole trader, but crime is available if you're an actual business. So there's 3 elements of cover. I wish going forward in the COVID, if you could just press the next slide, Vicky, please. Because going forward out of COVID, we've already seen on the news, on the press, that potentially there's going to be a lot of people looking to make claims after COVID. Simple reasons where people have said, well, this wouldn't have happened if we'd had PPE issued, etc., etc. So they do foresee a lot of claims coming in from directors and officers cover. And like I say, while that's on the screen, I'm not going to read through it all for you, but basically we foresee there's going to be more of an emphasis on potential claims, albeit from the individuals or from the estates of individuals who are unfortunately sadly may have lost their lives through COVID. So it's something quite important. Cyber, as I said, I've touched on this one. What they're doing and the criminals are doing are obviously coming in. So a lot of businesses have got staff working from home on internets that are much slower, not perhaps so protected. They're having to set up new systems, new processes of work, which they're unfamiliar with. And therefore, because they may well be distracted, and this is what the criminals are obviously relying on, they are actually accessing more computers and more businesses than they would have been able to in their normal environment when they were staff were confident that they knew their processes and didn't have anybody to trip them up. So the criminals are always about using something as cover, and COVID has certainly been a very good cover for them. So more businesses are vulnerable to this, and we've certainly seen and heard of more of our clients being attacked through cyber. So cyber insurance is something that's separate to your main business insurance, and is something you certainly want to be considering to ensure if you contact the police, that they can't help you in the same way they could if you'd had a robbery. So it's very difficult, and you're very vulnerable to being on your own if you have a cyber attack. So certainly going forward, I would consider and look at your computer equipment and your protection you have through that, and alternatively, obviously, look at cyber cover. Thanks, Vicky. Hand in hand with all of these things, though, and probably the sort of the main core, even before COVID, one of the main things that I would talk about with the clients is health and safety. Health and safety is paramount for you as businesses to protect you as individuals. Obviously, there's rules and regulations that we need to comply with to maintain and run a business, and certainly in respect of staff. And so health and safety run correctly and managed correctly is really key for protection of not only your customers, your staff, but most importantly you, because you are legally responsible. And through all these changes and these new regulations that are put on you as a business, your time spent and your acknowledgement of what the requirements you've got to meet are really key. So can I go to the next slide, please, Vicky? Thank you. So as you come back into the workplace, we've obviously got huge, and I'm not going to go through it because you'll have seen it and you'll probably be pulling your hair out. You've got loads of things you've got to think about now in your business and your premises as to what you've got to change, what you've got to comply with. And all of that has got to be wrapped up in your health and safety policy. And your risk assessments are obviously more in detailed, and they're very key. And most importantly, the most important thing to remember is if something was to go wrong, it doesn't matter what you've said, what you've told people, the only things that you can rely on is what is actually documented. So your documentation, your risk assessments are even more valid and more important in the new world. Thanks, Vicky. One of the things I thought I would mention, and it doesn't matter the size of your business, not everybody is clear on the riddle, which is the notification of accidents occurring at your business premises. So with COVID, that still has implications, and you needing to notify people of the situation if it should occur, God forbid that it does. So I think it's quite a good pertinent point to mention to people to look at the HSE website and to make yourself conversant with what you need to do for a riddle. Because if something was to happen, you do need, and there's very strict timelines into which you need to notify these instances. So if something was to occur, you need to cover yourself by making sure you've notified. So I thought it was pertinent to mention that. Also, because of people working off site, it increases your risk for you as a business owner. So if you've got people working off site, you do need to think about their safety off away from your premises, and actually a more heightened way, because you can't obviously see it. You need to check simple things about how they're working, what's their VDU set up, all the things that you would normally do in an office environment need to be replicated in their home. And so think about that for members of staff or that are more away from your premises than they would normally be. This one, it depends on whether you're a DIY person. I have to hold my hand up and say I'm no DIY expert, so I certainly would have to bring people in. So a lot of businesses are having to be changed in their layout, in their form. Simple things like perspex need to be put up, obviously stickers and markings out for the 2-meter rules, etc. If you're bringing in, though, contractors to do that work for you, that is a risk to you as a business, and you need to be thinking about that. So simply just bringing in a tradesman, it's not quite as simple as that at the moment with the COVID restrictions. So you do need to think about whether you're protecting them as well while they're working on your premises, and whether you've taken the necessary precautions for them. So just a note to cover that. The risk management services is what we work at the NFU Mutual. What we've done for our customers, we've introduced the free health and safety telephone support service to try and help them through this coronavirus. We've given them downloadable resources available for them. It's been obviously opened up and done on a temporary basis, but it's just something there to support. And it's always helpful if you can focus and get some more support any which way you can, really, on the health and safety. It will help you, protect you from the potential of any claims. And lastly, I said I'd just touch on Pandemic Re. I'm not sure how many people on the call are aware of the existing pool Res that are set up. There's one for terrorism and there's one for flood Re. So potentially the government and the insurers have come together and have put together a pool of money to help people in these circumstances, because obviously they are large claims when they do happen. So with the Pandemic Re, it is something that's being in very early stages of being looked at. but it hasn't really come to fruition yet. But I thought it's worth mentioning is that is sort of the government's stance at looking at it at the moment. There isn't any answers to it going forward at the moment, but at least it's under consideration. Needless to say, there isn't a magic wand, but at least they've done it before within the terrorism and the flood, and presumably maybe going forward there'll be something for the pandemic, but who knows? Obviously I can't comment, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that that's what's being considered. But thank you for your time. I've just given you a very high level overview in 10 minutes, but just really making points of things that perhaps you haven't considered. Thanks very much.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed, Lorraine. And if anyone has any particular questions, do contact Lorraine direct. So over to Alan. Thank you very much. Do you want to introduce yourself and your business and let people know what you've been working with recently?
Indeed. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alan Wilkins and my company is Macari Risk Management. So I'm a independent insurance broker based in Southampton, and myself and a couple of directors. We've got quite a wide and deep experience of the insurance sector. I'm sort of 30-year veteran, and I've insured anything from businesses through to personal insurance. And within that, also multiple types of businesses. And latterly was specialising in maybe the transport industry, sector, and hospitality and catering sort of sectors. But that's not to say that we won't undertake any insurances for any business, because the concept of insurance is obviously very generic across all of those businesses. The real skill is then understanding the business owner and what their needs and wants are. And that's the job of a professional insurance advisor, to sit with clients. But what we've seen in our sector over numbers of years really is the maybe a bit of an erosion in the time and professionalism taken to advise clients, and that's just is because of time constraints, and also acquisitions in the insurance sector where insurers are buying up insurers to become very large corporate entities, and that's also being mirrored in the broking industry, which then becomes more of a numbers game and sort of spreadsheet mentality to running the insurance business, rather than getting under the skin of business and giving them expert advice. So we set up about a year ago just to try and get into that space and give professional advice to clients and sit with them and work out what their needs and wants are. Now, quite often, our experience is that quite often it's, we want cover and we want it cheap as possible, and that's fine. We can do that, but I'll still take 2 hours to speak to you, because what I want to do is go through what you should have, and then if you don't want it, at least then I've documented on my file. That's not always the case with some brokers. They'll be on the phone and just try and sort of arrange things quickly and get the commission in. That's not always the case, but that can happen. But there should be a file document of that conversation, because we are lawfully obliged to discuss your needs and wants and then provide professional recommendations on cover. And then if you don't want to take it, that's fine. That's documented. So that's just a point to fix in your mind there. So if you have had an experience recently where you either can't get through to your broker or insurer, or you're not getting the right message through, you do have a right to access that information. That's your business information. That's on a file somewhere, or should be. If it's not, then that's maybe an angle that you can work with your legal advisors on. Let me just quickly go on to insurance itself. Property insurance started after the fire of London. That's now a $4 trillion industry globally. It was predominantly to insure against the risk of fire, or actually more importantly, as it first started, to pay for the cost of having your burning building extinguished by the private fire brigades. So it's grown over the years, but fundamentally, fire is the biggest cause of loss in business. And the example there we had previously of a £1.4 million loss, it's devastating in its effect. Business interruption insurance is more of a latter day add-on, and business insurance itself is designed to cover the loss of gross profit following an insured loss. So if you have a fire, it's designed then to pay you your gross profit to the point where you get back up to your normal trading position, so as though the fire never happened. So that's the important thing to make. So most policies will follow, in fact all policies will follow the insured peril. So if you have a fire, if you have a flood, if you've got flood cover on there, you know, these things will then, the BI cover will kick in, providing you've got it. Now, a lot of clients don't take business interruption insurance. They have a fire and flood policy, so what we call dry and wet perils. And that's what it covers. It doesn't cover business interruption anyway. So that's one set. They're never going to be able to claim for a BI loss. It's just not covered. Secondarily, there's that next set along where they have a standard commercial policy where you've got the fire and flood and all those different things you'd expect to be paid out for, and the business interruption that follows those insured perils. A third subset are ones where maybe a professional broker has sat with you and said, we can give you the BI cover for the fire and the flood and all those losses, but we can also include some extra covers in there. Denial of access following an infectious disease, murder or suicide on your premises that closes you down for a while whilst investigations are happening. All of those are extra covers. They ride on the back of that BI cover to widen the scope of it. And every element that you take is costed in. So when it comes to a pricing decision, you know, I want cover cheap, you're going to get cheap. And cheap means typically fire and flood and all that sort of stuff, with maybe a bit of BI cover if you've decided to upgrade it. What it's not necessarily going to cover you for is the full whiz bang of perils, including the BI and infectious diseases and denial of access. Now, some people have that cover and have been, you know, great in their decision making to pay the extra cover. That's the problem now, is that we find that this, what is a throwaway cover or has been a throwaway cover in the past, is now a central problem, a central issue, particularly, you know, with the government initially saying, go and speak to your insurer because they're going to cover you. We then look at the small print and find that actually that's not the case. And now this is spawning, obviously, some legal action, and that's all now in the courts or about to be decided, because the FCA have decided to get some interpretation on all those different clauses and variants of those clauses to get a determination. Now, in the States, they've got a slightly different position, and I'm sure the legal ladies will go into this in a moment. But with US, under US law, particularly Californian law, they're taking a complete polar opposite. They're saying, well, there was an infectious disease that damaged the property, so therefore it's a BI loss because the property's damaged, and the BI covers, you know, follows on from a damage to the property. Under UK law, as case law currently stands, it has to have some sort of micro change to the structure to be determined to be a property damage. So that's why BI cover, at the moment, most insurers are saying, well, if you've got it, it's not covered. And then if you've got that infectious disease clause, they're then bringing in the arguments about, well, look at the wording, because it says it should be within a 25-mile radius, not of this premises. And then in certain circumstances, the clause has been so badly worded because it's been passed down from underwriter to underwriter, or a junior has been left to draft the clause and throw it in, or whatever it might be, and nobody's rechecked it through. And in that little subset, there will be some claims occurring, because I'm sure when it comes down to the law, you know, it will start to potentially favour claimants. But that is up to the courts to decide, you know, and we've got to wait for a change in the case law and a determination by a judge. So if you're caught in that situation now, the first thing you need to do is get in touch with your broker and your insurer. You need to lodge the claim in the first instance and let them tell you why it's not covered. If you don't believe or understand, challenge that decision. If you feel it's unjustifiable, there are mechanisms in place to escalate it, and that's the Financial Conduct Authority, which you need to sort of lodge your complaint to. As I said to you, the broker should have files. They should be documenting everything they say to you in the pre-contractual stage of arranging that insurance. And they do that to protect themselves as much as you, because when it comes down to making a claim, those facts need to be determined and put to the insurers, particularly if they decide to start to decline the claim. Okay, so there's a few things you can do in the immediate sense, but also do understand that if it's not covered under the policy, if there's not a clause in there to say you've got BI cover, you're not going to get a BI. Unfortunately not going to get paid under your policy, because at the moment, you know, this is not seen as a damage. This is seen as a commercial loss to businesses as a result of a a global decision by the government to go into lockdown. So we've got a long way to run with this, and we'll see how it works out over the next few months. So that's all from me. And please get in touch if you want to discuss any issues and get some sort of no names advice or opinions. What I can't do is tell you if you're definitely covered or not, if I've not insured you in the past, but so I can give you some sort of guidance and help and support.
Great, appreciate that, and do put your contact details in the chat, and then people can get in touch with you. So David, if it's becoming an issue and people want to speak to a solicitor, what is it that you can and can't do, and what could your team, amongst many others of course, but what could your team help people with at this stage?
Well, good afternoon everybody. I'm David Lawrence, the Senior Partner of Eric Robinson Solicitors, but this actually is not my particular area. So Matthew, I'm going to duck that question. I'm going to pass straight over to my two colleagues from our dispute resolution team who are here today, Liz Waghorn and Liz Eastley, who are going to tell you all these things. So the two Liz's, who's going first to do what?
I'm going first, yeah. So
okay. Over to you then, Liz.
Okay, thanks. Just the business interruption insurance, or sometimes it's known as revenue protection insurance. So just to be aware that, if you're looking at your policy and it doesn't say business interruption, if it says revenue protection, it might cover the same sort of thing. So since the outbreak, many businesses have been closed, and it's currently not clear when they'll be able to reopen. And despite the government providing the furlough scheme for employees, businesses continue to suffer disruption to their business and associated losses. I'm aware that many of you have policies in place, and it's becoming increasingly apparent that some insurers are less than keen to pay out. Today, we'd like to cover details of some of the policy contents and terms and recent developments in this ever-changing landscape. As a quick overview, the insurance policy will consist of a schedule of cover and usually a separate document setting out the policy terms and conditions. This forms the basis of the contract between you and the insurer. The terms of the individual policy will vary depending on which insurance company you're insured with, and some of the terms of the policy will be very specific with strict criteria having to be met. My colleague Elizabeth Eastley will go through a few of the sample policies after I've spoken, just to help you out with that. When a trigger event arises, the insurer will pay out under the terms of the policy up to a set limit and the specified period of time. Some policies exclude certain types of income and put caps on the amount that can be claimed. So it's worth checking these details to see what the limitations are. It's also worth noting that some policies are specific about the notifications of a claim and the way that this should be done, and failure to adhere to this may result in insurer refusing to pay out. So whether a particular term applies to a business can only be answered with an examination of the schedule and policy wording of each individual policy. I know that some of you have faced a flat refusal by insurance providers to pay out on these policies when you believed you had cover in place. Worth noting that insurance brokers are not the actual insurers, and it's become apparent that some brokers are advising individuals and businesses that their policies don't cover the COVID-19 pandemic, when in fact they've not made an actual approach to the insurer to establish their position. It's just something for people to be aware of, that, to make sure that the brokers have put it to the insurers. So due to the level of cover provided by these policies, some insurers have made amendments to their policies following the SARS outbreak in Asia in 2003. And as a result of these exclusions, some of the policies don't cover SARS-like diseases, which coronavirus is. And those with policies like that will find that those exclusions, they don't receive any payout. So that's also something to consider. Some of the policies include wording such as notifiable disease, which the coronavirus was from the 5th of March 2020, and also specify that an occurrence should have occurred within a specific radius of the premises. Other policies provide triggers based on the manifestation of the disease, and it has to have occurred at the premises, which may exclude closure by the public authority under the new coronavirus regulations. It remains to be seen how the courts will interpret this wording. There are no hard and fast rules on the courts considering these matters, and it's hoped that the court will use a common sense approach rather than making these policies, reading them literally. The feeling is that the courts will consider the purpose of these policies, which will result in the right outcome for businesses. If the insurance company continues to refuse to pay out, there are a few ways to tackle this. You could suggest settlement by way of mediation. You could make a complaint to the Financial Ombudsman Service, who have actually increased their limit on claims for up to £350,000, depending on when the issue giving rise to the complaint arose, or ultimately issuing court proceedings. In recent developments, the Financial Conduct Authority have provided an update on its test case, which started this week and will be going before the High Court in the second half of July. They've issued details of policy wording which may give rise to disputes between policyholders and insurers, together with key documents which will form part of the test case to be considered by the court. They intend to provide details of all the relevant insurers and the policies that may have impacted wordings in early July, so just need to look out for updates in relation to that. However, caution has been advised in assuming that if your insurer is included in the list, you will automatically result in a payout. The court may still determine that policies do not cover the pandemic. Equally, if your insurance company is not listed, a determination by the court as to the interpretation of the policy wording should assist insurers in making a decision about whether they need to pay out under the policy. If you feel like you've exhausted all avenues and you would like us to assist you, please contact us to discuss your individual situation, and we can give you advice on next steps and the best way forward to achieve a resolution. I'll just now hand over to my colleague Elizabeth Easley, who will just look at a few policies in more detail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Matthew, I can't seem to share my screen.
Vicky is the host, so let's see if we can. She'll make you able to do that, hopefully.
Brilliant.
You'll be able to do it now. Yeah, there you go.
Right. Hopefully everyone can see that. If there's any issues, obviously let me know. Thanks, Liz, for going through that. As she said, I will just expand on what she's mentioned. The first thing, again, to just recover is that here for insurance policies, there are two documents that we need to cover, the policy and the schedule, and together they form the contract between the insurer and the business about what and how much any insurance will pay out, and that will obviously be based on any certain insured events. As Elizabeth Michael mentioned, policy wording varies widely between the different insurers, and so it's really important that a detailed analysis is always needed with these. This is just one example from Aviva. As you will see within this slide here, their policies exclude new and emerging diseases, and this was on the back of the 2003 SARS outbreak in Asia. So this is again something to have a look at. With who is covered, often the schedule sets out the maximum limit for the insurance payout, briefly details exclusions of the cover, and refers to the policy for the description of what's covered and in what circumstances. So I will come on to what's a typical policy in a moment, but what I thought I would mention just at this juncture is that in March 2020, the government recommended that places close. In some policies, I am aware that the wording says that they will pay out for an act of government, and the question the court are going to have to consider is whether the word recommended that places close is in fact an act of government, or whether it is just, as on the face of it, a recommendation that they close, and it's down to the individual company to decide whether they closed. So that's something to consider. So policy schedules, obviously I've removed all the references to monies, but this is a typical Hiscox, which is one of the companies which is through the test case at the moment. This is their schedule. With this, one of their reference is under public authority. 11B, as I've underlined, any occurrence of any human infectious or human contagious disease, an outbreak which must be notified to the local authority. And I imagine that coronavirus would be caught within this definition. So although the policy wording provides cover in the event of closure by public authority, arguably including closure under coronavirus regulations, other policies may trigger based on the manifestation of the disease at the premises. And this is where this clause here comes in as well. How the courts will interpret such clauses remains to be seen. And obviously a close eye is just going to need to be kept on the current court proceedings, which are going through, I believe, in July, Elizabeth mentioned. Another example here is where we've got reference to infectious disease. Again, for any occurrence of any notifiable disease at, again, the premises. Notifiable disease is classed as food or drink poisoning, but more importantly at 2, any human infectious or human contagious disease, an outbreak of which the local authority has stipulated. Again, similar wording to the Hiscock one, not quite the same, but similar. So it's, again, down to the courts to decide. It will also be apparent from further consideration of policy wordings. Again, there's sometimes specific exclusions, so those are going to have to be checked. Obviously, today is just a quick recap of some of the examples, and because each case is very fact specific, obviously, if you do have any specific questions, we would need to have a look at documents, so do just get in touch. And I know Elizabeth's popped her email address on the chat, but obviously our details are here as well. And that's everything from us, really.
Great, thank you very much indeed. We'll just get the screen back, and that gives us about 10 minutes for any general questions, but please do, colleagues, take advantage of these kind offers from New Forest businesses to help each other. That's what we do here. If you need to contact Lorraine, Alan, or indeed David and the team at Eric Robinson, please do. But anyone want to ask anything more generally speaking? Yeah, I've got Jackie.
Yeah, hello, Matthew. Just a question about the FCA and the Ombudsman. So, Matthew, you've put you've sort of sent your information off to the Ombudsman. I have to the FCA. Do we need to do both, Alan? Do you think, or what's the difference? I know what the difference between them are, but should we be sending our information off to both bodies?
Yeah, I'll let Alan answer. I thought they were the same thing, but Alan. Oh, unmute first. Alan, just unmute.
Yeah, so I'm off mute now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're right. They're a subset of the FCA. So the first route is into the financial ombudsman. They're set up to take calls from the public and then assess your particular circumstances. Whereas the FCA proper are more the overseer regulatory body of insurance professionals or mediators. So yeah, financial ombudsman.
Yeah. So yeah, I have to
be in your policy, the details in the policy.
Yeah, great. I have to say, I mean, my business partner did is doing all this, and I had a very long phone call with them. That they were very good and very helpful. I mean, it didn't solve it there and then, but I mean, they will talk it through with you and advise you.
I had the same experience. I spoke to the FCA and they were great, but I'm just unclear. Do I now need to do this process again through the Ombudsman section of the FCA?
Yeah, you should lodge with the financial ombudsman,
right, okay.
because the FCA are certainly coordinating the court action.
Yeah, okay.
Looking at the wordings, that's the big macro kind of strategic stuff. Whereas the ombudsman are set up specifically to deal with individual cases.
Okay, that's what I need to clarify. Thank you.
And what we also found out was that if you want to expedite it for financial hardship, which is quite likely, I think within 14 days you'll get your reference number, then just call back and say, by the way, because of this obvious reason for you, we're shut down, and they will add on this expediting, or however they word it. Good, thank you. We've got about 5-6 minutes, so we've got a couple there. Miranda.
Yes, thank you. One of the problems with COVID being an infectious notifiable disease is that nobody could get tested unless they were admitted to hospital. And it is possible that one closed premises because people were ill, and there's no, the GP surgeries refused to see them, and nobody would test them. and this is something that we've certainly come up against.
Absolutely, and of course, this will hopefully come at part of the test cases to establish what is reasonable to find out. I mean, we've been told to find someone within a mile who's got it. I mean, you know, where do you begin to do that?
Well,
sorry, Jackie, yeah, you had a point on that actually before.
yeah, I did. Yeah, I contacted Public Health England, and under the Freedom of Information Act, they have to provide you with that information, and they did. They were able to confirm that there were cases within 3 miles of my postcode, and I got that in writing. No, it doesn't appear that it's going to be helpful with my insurance claim, but you can get that information.
And I guess the solicitors would all say that just get all this stuff together, you know, get whatever you can, and just to show that you have covered and ticked all those boxes. Yes. Catherine, you had a question, I think.
Yeah, it was regarding the directors and officers cover. I saw on there that it covers possible insolvency, and I was just a bit concerned about what does it actually cover, because is it does it cover financial costs if they go insolvent? What happens if there's wrongful trading, or is it covering them not doing directors' duties properly, etc.?
No.
Yeah, it's all about actual defence side of things. So directors and officers is specifically about a defence cost. So basically you get the legal representation to help you. It doesn't, obviously, it stops at the point of any criminal activity or something going wrong, but it's there for defence. So it covers you up to those points. So that's what it's like. You'll get the advice and support through it.
Okay, brilliant. So it's more the legal side of things, covering the legal side. Brilliant, lovely, thank you.
And about 2 minutes left. Anyone else got any general points? Anyone else? Yeah, David.
Oh, yeah. It sort of goes back to the point about risk assessments and leading to Riddle. There is a thing in the world of cyber that, and Hiscox are a big insurer when it comes to cyber. But it's if there is an event, if you do make a claim, then it'd be interesting to know what the insurance guys are going to say on this. But you seem to have made reasonable steps, you know, taken reasonable action to deter the crime from happening in the first place. So if you leave the door open, so to speak, and somebody breaks in and steals your data, and you can't show that you've documented what you do, that your software's up to date and you've taken these reasonable steps, you might have a bit of a problem with an insurance claim. It'd be interesting to know what the insurance guys have got to say on that.
Any final thoughts on that, or anything else, Alan, Lorraine, before we go?
Well, I mean, it's certainly an underlying precept of insurance that you should act as though you're not insured and run your business prudently. If you don't run your business prudently, of course, then you may have a D&O claim against you from the shareholders, you know, because you're not exercising your fiduciary duties. So yeah, basic good. I mean, when you look at risk, you know, 40% can be insured, 60% must be taken by the business through risk management, mitigation, or on the balance sheet. You know, so get yourself a professional risk advisor, get someone like David to go through a risk analysis and make sure that you've got the doors closed, and then the insurance, because it doesn't matter how tightly you close them. Of course, there'll always be, you know, hackers that can come in through the back doors and the traps that they set. But certainly do all those things as a prudent business. And then you won't have any uncomfortable decision, any sort of arguments, etc. post claim. One of the fine thing, Matthew, before we close down, if you feel that you should have received certain advice and you paid for it, particularly if you paid a fee to your broker, you know, that they should, as I said, have gone through a full risk analysis themselves, looking at your insurance program, your business, and documenting. So there is an angle there. Speak to your legal advisor. Brokers do hold professional indemnity insurance that covers any errors and omissions that they do. Okay, so that might be another route for people that feel that they should have received, you know, good solid legal advice, but were let down by their insurance professional.
Great, thanks, Alan. Sandy,
oh, sorry, I was going to say, Matthew, I was just going to add to that, just about the cyber point that David just raised. The point about it from the cover under the cyber is under the statement of facts, they ask about what you do and what processes you've got. And a simple example, I've just done one recently where the portable equipment, so the iPads and etc., that the guys were taking out weren't encrypted. And so that was then highlighted, and therefore then there's certainly additional excesses and everything. So it depends on what level the company's at with its IT already as to what cover and what restrictions are put in it. So it does come out when on an individual basis for a statement of fact.
Great, thanks, Lorraine. Sandy, quick point, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, just very quickly, that in terms of commercial lending, one of the things that lenders will look at is make sure that adequate insurance is in place. What we're talking about is good housekeeping, but there is to be a very, very grey area. But lenders will want to make sure, and in case indeed any third parties who look at your business will want to see it's well managed and there's good governance in place.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, inevitably there are lots of questions raised about this, and this is an ongoing situation, but I'm very grateful to Lorraine, to Alan, to David and Liz for looking after us today, raising, I'm sure, lots of questions. So please do contact them if you need any advice through any of them. And indeed, don't forget, Matt's 48 and a half hours now, or whatever it is, to go till the deadline for the discretionary grant fund. We gather again this time next week, when we've heard several times the importance of communication throughout this, keeping in contact with your clients, your colleagues, your staff, and it's certainly helped my businesses to do that, and we've had some great loyalty from our customers. It's really important. But social media is one way of doing that, and there have been some changes recently to business pages and so on, and so we'll be going through some of those recent changes to social media business pages in particular. And if you have any particular questions, again, just send them through. So any questions about that you'd like Rebecca to address on that next week, please send through. Any questions for David on cybersecurity, please send through. And then the following week, finally, is risk assessments. Two local risk management specialists, Ruth and Julie, will share their experience, their advice, and there's some great offers as well to help us with those COVID risk assessments, the COVID secure risk assessment, which it sounds like is going to be an essential requirement to reopen whatever your business. So more about that coming up, but thank you for your time as always, and try and keep smiling. Thank you. Bye for now.